This is not getting discussed on the mainstream media. Not only are they wrong legally, but the fact that they would do this is outrageous. This is an overreaction and really nonsense. How would you react if this was your son or your daughter? It's the offense of knowing the truth. It's the offense of having an alternate worldview. Saying God bless you to someone is not a violation of the law. Welcome to the broadcast, everyone. This is our final segment. This is the third in a series that we've done on a very important project, and that is a case that's made a lot of news. It's the IRS targeting conservative and Christian organizations. And we've been talking with a lot of experts over the last week. These are, by the way, excerpts, which you're going to see, that did not actually make it into the cut of our movie, Tax Invasion. You can see that entire movie at Tax Invasion. Just go to irsmovie.com so you can see the entire Tax Invasion movie. These were things that did not make it into the movie, but we wanted to bring you this information. I had a chance to sit down with Senator Rand Paul while he was in our media center to discuss his views on the IRS targeting and his view on the tax system generally. Take a listen. You know, what's interesting is the targeting of the Tea Party. Lois Lerner's admission that took place at the ABA meeting came out. They actually are doing this during the 2010 election cycle. So we know that now as fact. The IRS has admitted that. Your sense of the political motivations here. The IRS is trying to do a bit of a mea culpa, but the president keeps calling these phony scandals. These are not real.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think the American people, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, they're horrified at this because no one wants to think, you know what, I supported one candidate, the other guy won, and now I'm going to be audited or punished or have my business closed down, my religion challenged, my political beliefs challenged. Nobody really wants that to happen in government. So this is really, I think of all the scandals that are going on, one of the most offensive. And I think it'll continue to go. The other thing I think that really gets to me about this is that when you look at contributions from the IRS union, they gave over $1 million in the last two cycles, all to Democrats. And so really the question is, are they sitting over at the IRS from top to bottom looking who you contributed to and deciding whether to audit you? So I think not only do the perpetrators need to be fired and or imprisoned, I think you need to look from top to bottom and really should government employees be involved with contributing to one party versus the other.
The president came out when the scandal first was really hit the media with the Inspector General. They tried to get ahead of the Inspector General report. And he said he was outraged. It was horrible what happened. He then instructed his Attorney General, Eric Holder, to take direct action. Eric Holder was the one who inserted that this may in fact be criminal. Yet I represent 41 of the groups that were targeted, and some of the small ones and large ones. No one's been contacted by the FBI. There's been no investigations done. Do you think these were political statements that the White House was trying to do? We now know, of course, it's going much higher up the internally than we initially thought. But what's your sense of the reaction?
It's like so many other responses from President Obama. He says the right thing, and you want to believe him. After Benghazi, he said he was going to fire the people who were responsible, but no one's been fired. After the IRS scandal, has anybody really been fired? Someone resigned, but I think they were planning on resigning.
Right.
The main person who took the Fifth Amendment, my understanding, she's still being paid, correct?
Yes, she is. Lois Lerner is still on the government's payroll, and she had actually access to her computers until a few weeks ago.
And here's the other point. If she's convicted, will she still get her pension? You know, she apparently has a decade-long history of this. You know, George Will reported that when she was at the FEC, she told a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate, we'll leave you alone, we'll drop the charges if you just promise never to run for office again. That's the kind of bully nature we don't want our government involved in.
When you first heard about the IRS targeting, what was your reaction?
It was almost disbelief. And then when I heard that some of these groups were being asked what books you read, I mean, what kind of country would we live in where the tax agency is asking people what kind of books they read? And really, I think it's done for intimidation factor. You know, there are many people in churches where the ministers are afraid to speak out because they've been threatened that their tax-exempt status will be taken away from them. Here, we're not threatening to take it away. We're just threatening never to give you tax-exempt status. And so, no, I think of all the scandals, this one's the one that resonates with a lot of us who came out of the Tea Party most, because really, no one thinks that your government ought to be able to target you for your religious or your political beliefs.
You know, Senator Paul said the bullying nature and culture of the IRS has been going on for decades, but finally they've been caught. They kind of turned themselves in when they offered that famous apology. When we come back from the break, I'm going to play a little bit of a video we put together of all the apologies that have come forward over the last few weeks on these cases and others. And you're going to see, folks, that it's really outrageous, what has happened here. But we're taking a stand and taking action. And I want to encourage you to sign our petition to remove, eliminate, and abolish the IRS as we know it. You can sign that by going to aclj.org or calling us at 1-877-989-2255. That's aclj.org or 877-989-2255. We have a lot more to talk about when we come back, including more with Senator Rand Paul and our friend, Dr. Ben Carson.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme. An out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Again, let me urge you to sign on to this petition to abolish the IRS as we know it. You can do so by going to aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255. It's 877-989-2255 or aclj.org. Now, you've heard a lot about apologizing. In fact, Lois Lerner said she apologized. She was the head of the tax exempt. By the way, none of those apologies are accepted because it's not doing justice to our clients. But listen to this, what our team, our video team, put together here. Talk about some apologies. Take a listen.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title. That was wrong. The IRS would like to apologize for that.
I am as frustrated and angry as anyone with the flawed launch of healthcare.gov. So let me say directly to these Americans, you deserve better. I apologize.
And to all the American people, I apologize that you have to go through this stuff every 3 months, it seems like.
Neither he and I are technology geeks, and we assumed that it was up and ready to run. But the good news is, although it's not, and we apologize for that.
Well, I apologize.
And we apologize for that.
I apologize.
The IRS would like to apologize for that.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate. Wait a minute! I didn't realize apologies were sufficient in IRS-related issues.
Well, these apologies, as I said, have not been accepted. And I talked to Senator Rand Paul about what is happening within the IRS culture, especially Lois Lerner, who was head of this. By the way, she asked people when she was the general counsel for the Federal Election Commission and she was investigating various candidates, she asked them about their prayer life and the contents of her prayers. And guess what? The IRS, when she was heading up the tax exempt division, they asked those very same questions. Who are you praying to? What were the contents of your prayer? Here's what Senator Rand Paul had to say about Lois Lerner. So if you had the authority as president or within the Senate to deal with the IRS right now, what would you recommend?
Well, I think somebody needs to be prosecuted for what happened, and so immediately that's to happen, but immediately Lerner would be gone from her job. If you're not going to participate in the investigation, you're pleading the Fifth Amendment, it doesn't mean you're automatically guilty, but really you should be suspended without pay. If she's exonerated, give her back her pay and her back pay, but really suspended without pay is what she should be until she gets a trial.
This also brings up the issue of the tax code. It is unbelievably burdensome. The regulations dwarf the size of the tax code, which is thousands of pages. What would you do with the tax code, with the Internal Revenue Service as an enforcement vehicle? Is it time to scrap it, to abolish it, start all over again? What do you think?
Well, I think you've hit the point very well in the sense that because it's so complicated and takes so many agents, we're going to add 16,000 agents for Obamacare, because they have such extraordinary power to invade your business or your personal life, it's really inevitable that some kind of problem is going to occur. Could be Republican or Democrat, but someone's going to abuse their power. Going back in history, people have used the IRS from the Republican side as well. So what I would say is that's a great argument for simplifying the tax code. I think we ought to just have a flat
So would
tax.
it, in a sense, by adopting that type of tax plan, which would simplify matters, more equitably distributed, would that basically, could we eliminate the IRS as an enforcement agency?
I think in many ways you could. I think what you could do is you really wouldn't have agents out enforcing things. There'd still be some kind of way to review tax returns, but they would be so simple. I can't even understand my tax return. My tax return is maybe 100 pages long, and I have to assume my accountant's helping me.
Right.
And then if something's wrong on there, I still signed it. I have to go to jail, even though I can't begin to understand all of the different blanks and all of the whereases and wherefores.
Let me turn just for a moment here. You mentioned pastors in the pulpit. They are intimidated. They're intimidated about the IRS. They're afraid to speak out on issues of the day. They get notices from groups that say, if you speak out on behalf of a candidate for public office, we're going to complain to the IRS and get your tax-exempt status, which the tax code actually does not say. And the First Amendment really says the opposite. What would you tell pastors?
Don't be afraid. Speak out. No one's ever been prosecuted. No one's ever had their tax-exempt status taken away. So don't be afraid. And if you don't speak out now, someday it'll be too late. And there are so many things where government is encroaching on us that we do need to be bold. We need to speak out, and people need to be unafraid.
I appreciate what Senator Rand Paul just said about the intimidation factor. I know pastors that are watching this broadcast right now. It's intimidating. You're worried about what the IRS is going to say or do, and that's why we need to abolish it as it is and reformat it into something that is manageable. It is not right now. And you pastors, churches, church leaders, do not be intimidated by the bullying tactics of the IRS, because we beat them back when we do this. Dr. Ben Carson, a noted pediatric neurosurgeon, brilliant medical doctor, but also a gifted orator and a tremendous political thinker. He gave quite a speech at the National Prayer Breakfast. Take a listen.
There is no one who can possibly comply with every jot and tittle of our tax. If I wanted to get you or you, I could get you on a tax issue. That doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is come up with something that's simple. And when I pick up my Bible, you know what I see? I see the fairest individual in the universe, God, and He's given us a system. It's called tithe.
Let me take you back, though. You're a pediatric neurosurgeon. You're used to tense situations. But how was it giving a speech that wasn't just happy thoughts, so to speak, but a really tough speech, a really good speech, detailed speech, really critiquing the administration when the president's 3 feet away from you? How did that, give us some of the atmospherics on that. How did that go?
Well, first of all, it was interesting in the sense that the last time I did the National Prayer Breakfast, which was in 1997, and Clinton was president, I had an opportunity to talk to him beforehand in the green room. Lots of pleasantries were exchanged. And President Obama didn't bother to come to the green room or to talk to anybody. So I kind of, as I was giving the speech, really didn't look at him, really wasn't thinking about, quite frankly, the fact that he was there. I had prayed a lot about this because I wondered why it was arranged that I was, chosen to do this. I'd given it before. I asked them, has anybody ever done it before? Twice, and they said only one person, and that's Billy Graham. And I certainly don't see myself in that category. And I just said, why is this happening, Lord? What is it that you want me to say? And I really didn't know until the morning of the speech, to be honest with you. They were wanting, a transcript. They wanted all these things that they could screen. But I honestly told them, I don't have it because I don't know what I'm going to say. But once I got up there, usually when I get in front of a crowd, I turn to a different person. I'm normally kind of soft-spoken, quiet. But when I get in front of a crowd, I turn to a different person. And I just always ask God to give me the right words to say.
You've got this whole controversy with the IRS brewing, which has been significant, with record leaks and targeting of individuals. But you mentioned, and you've talked about this, the IRS is going to be playing a role in our health care under the Obamacare legislation. And that, in my mind, is a very dangerous move.
Here we've already demonstrated that there's significant corruption in the IRS, and now you're going to take them and put them over the very largest program in the government. I mean, there's no logic being exercised here whatsoever. And but what's even more alarming is a lot of the people who came to this country years ago came here because they were being persecuted. You know, they were coming from places like England, where if you spoke out against the king, you could be pilloried, imprisoned, or even killed. And so we were supposed to be free of that kind of thing. But here we are doing it in a more modern way by using agencies of the government to persecute those who disagree with the power structure. And the worst thing about it is most of us don't even realize that that's what's happening.
If you want to sign on and join with us in this fight, you can do so at aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's aclj.org or 877-989-2255. Don't forget to watch the entire movie. These are aspects, what you're seeing here did not make it into the movie. Same interviews, same people, but did not get into the movie. You want to watch that movie at irsmovie.com. It's absolutely free, irsmovie.com. Back with more in a moment.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme, an out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. Dr. Ben Carson, as I said, noted pediatric neurosurgeon, brilliant orator, brilliant political thinker, I think a great leader, talked about the concern that he has, and I share this concern, about the IRS enforcing the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which has had a disastrous rollout. Take a listen. You had this leak of 100,000 basically Social Security numbers and tax information now has been leaked by the agency, by the IRS itself. They're going to have access to this mega data report for healthcare records. And of course, they're going to be doing the enforcement of Obamacare. The IRS is supposed to be hiring 15,000 new agents. Now, you've been practicing medicine for a long time, a world-renowned neurologist, a pediatric surgeon. I mean, your expertise as a pediatric neurosurgeon and the complications of those files and the records that you have to deal with, how do you feel about, as a physician and as a citizen, that information being placed in the hands of the Internal Revenue Service?
Well, I think that it's untenable. You know, this is some of the most sensitive information that a person possesses. And to have that in the hands of people who've already proven that ethical considerations are not high on their list is extremely alarming. But what's even more alarming to me is that people aren't as alarmed about this as they need to be. We're talking about the very fundamental freedoms that characterize the creation of our nation. And we're just sort of like sitting there saying, yeah, that's terrible. Okay, what's on TV? You know, we have got to wake up out of this slumber and recognize that the fundamental principles of freedom are being threatened in our society.
What do you do to go about getting those people, the American people, really alert and engaged, awakened on these issues? But how do you do this on a mass scale?
I've been traveling across the country giving lots of talks, 3 or 4 talks a week. The crowds are just enormous. The level of enthusiasm is through the roof. And, I think it's a matter of trying to awaken people, because there are a lot of people who have tuned out, who just feel that the whole thing is so corrupt. Some of the saddest communications I've gotten have been from elderly Americans who used to be the most enthusiastic voting bloc, who just say they're waiting to die. They just don't feel that there's any hope for our country anymore. And I think the more we talk about it, the more enthusiastic these people become. In some of my talks this week, I've been talking about courage and bravery and talking about, Nathan Hale, Patrick Henry, some of these people, what they were willing to give up, John Hancock, because they believed in what they were fighting for. And, we say that we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. well, you cannot be free if you're not brave. Freedom is not free.
You know, Benjamin Disraeli had this great quote saying, "Nothing's too difficult for the brave," and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So, Ben, let me ask you this. Let's talk about some solutions here. What would your proposal be if somehow you had the authority to make the changes necessary to see our government put back in a more sound basis? But let's talk about taxes. What would you do?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, the corporate tax rate needs to be lowered significantly. Just look what Canada did and look what a boon it was for them. And we now have the highest corporate tax rates in the world. And then we wonder, why do corporations go offshore? You know, corporations are not created to support government programs. You know, they're there to make money. So we need to understand that, first of all. In terms of individual taxes, you know, the reason on the prayer breakfast I talked about tithing is because I do believe that God is the fairest individual in the universe. And he thought proportionality was the way to do it. Now, in order for proportionality to work, though, you have to get rid of the loopholes. Because that's the only way that it can be really fair. If somebody who can afford fancy lawyers and accountants can get out of paying taxes, that's terribly unfair. And if, you know, a large percentage of the population isn't involved in paying federal taxes at all, but they get say in how much the other half has to pay, that's not fair either.
Right.
So, you know, if it's done in a proportional way, you eliminate all those things because, you know, depending on who you talk to, they think you should do this one more, you should do this one more. So you do it proportional, you don't have to even argue about that anymore.
So are you basically talking about a flat tax, a straight 10% across the board tax that every American taxpayer would contribute?
And it doesn't have to be 10%, but whatever percent it is, it has to be the same for everybody. That's really the key. And,
right.
You know, some people say, but what about this poor person who only makes $10,000 a year? Well, the fact of the matter is that poor person who makes $10,000 a year is still part of our society. And, you know, they may only have to pay, you know, $1,000 versus the guy who makes $100 million and has to pay $10 million, but they get the same rights. Now, that, to me, is an extremely fair system. And that's what we have to start thinking about, fairness for everybody. And we have to define fairness as something that works for all segments, not just something that works for the people who voted for you, or the people who are in your party. And that seems to be how we're starting to define it now.
So I always look at what's the worst case scenario, or what's the plan B. And that is the American people just say, well, those are all interesting plans that Dr. Carson is proposing, and he's a great physician, but gee, I don't know what he knows about taxes and business and history and political science. I mean, I know as your friend, I know that you know this area, but I don't want to do anything. I don't want to rock the boat. What happens to our country?
Well, I would simply say, first of all, 5 physicians signed a Declaration of Independence, our founding document. Point that out. And physicians have been involved in lots of things and have a tremendous amount of education. So, you know, that's a pretty silly argument.
Well, I loved your line at, I think it was CPAC, where you said it's not brain surgery. I'm talking about fixing the economy.
Exactly. You know, you want to go back and you look historically at what happens when you do certain things. You know, look at empirical data and learn how to make decisions based on facts. And if we go back and we look at what happens when you raise taxes, what happens when you lower taxes, what happens when people perceive things as fair, what happens when people perceive things as unfair, and just analyze that data and extrapolate from that data. I actually think that the American people are a lot smarter than anybody gives them credit for. It's just that things typically have not been explained very well, or they're explained by politicians who put horrendous spins on things. And then, unfortunately, when you can co-opt the media, then you've really got things going for yourself. You know, and Alinsky said, you know, your opinion that you're trying to thrust on the people may be a minority opinion, but the goal is to make everybody think that it's the majority opinion and that their opinion is the minority opinion. Then it becomes much easier to shut them down.
So let me ask you the political question. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Let's say that for some reason you became president of the United States and you were dealing with all these issues. What would you do with the IRS?
Well, if we can enact a fair tax system that's proportional, we don't need the IRS. So I would,
right.
I wouldn't get rid of them in one fell swoop, but I would reduce them bit by bit, because one of the problems with a system that's been in place for a long time is if you simply pull the rug out, there's going to be a lot of furniture that's going to fall down. So you have to do this in a reasonable way, but you have to have a goal, and you have to really get rid of things that aren't needed anymore. You also have to recognize that there are a lot of lawyers, there are a lot of accountants, you know, whose living is made on this complex tax system. So we have to do it in a way that gives them an opportunity to retool and find other things to do.
So you're carrying this message now, Ben, around the country. I know you travel all over the world, and I know it's being received well. So, you know, you were a busy pediatric neurosurgeon with very complex cases, and now we've got a complex system here in the United States. Is it time for a neurosurgeon president? Well, pediatric neurosurgeon president of the United States?
Well, you know, what the Lord has in store for me, I'm not sure. But in the meantime, I feel very passionate about the fact that I cannot sit here and see, you know, our nation deteriorate like this. And I feel that I have a responsibility to get out there and sound the trumpet. You know, very much like many of the, I know a lot about American history, and I know what those people went through. And I know that a lot of them had the opportunity to sit back and relax, and some of them were really very wealthy. And they put all that on the line because they loved the nation, and they wanted freedom, and they were willing to fight for it. And that's what I want, you know, for my children. That's what I want for my grandchildren. That's what I want for our nation. So I can't walk away and just allow that to happen.
Well, the good news is, Dr. Carson and others, the American people are waking up. We've heard from almost 250,000 of them that are saying enough of this. We want this abuse of the IRS to stop. And I appreciate that you are taking action and responding accordingly. Being an informed citizen makes a big difference. So again, a huge thank you. But we also want to encourage you, if you've not yet signed the petition to abolish the IRS, to join us in that fight. You can do so at ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. That's ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. It's an easy way to do it, and that will help us in this fight that we're engaged in. Again, ACLJ.org or 1-877-989-2255. And if you want to watch the movie, it's free. IRSmovie.com. That'll do it for the broadcast this week. We'll talk to you next week.
The Internal Revenue Service scandal is getting worse. Now there are new revelations of the IRS targeting Tea Party and conservative groups, disturbing admissions that the IRS scheme was even more partisan and more coordinated than previously thought. The American Center for Law and Justice represents 41 groups in a federal lawsuit challenging the IRS. We intend to get to the bottom of this unlawful and unconstitutional scheme, an out-of-control IRS that intentionally targeted conservative organizations, violating their First Amendment rights. Stand with the ACLJ now. Sign on to our petition to end IRS abuse. Add your name by calling 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255 or online, aclj.org.